Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am your technical critique, and I just came back from Robocop. Yes, I went to my pajamas, as you can clearly see. Now, I know that in Monuments Men, I was supposed to do a Lego movie review right after that, and although I did see the movie and it is awesome, shortly after seeing Monuments Men, I happened to get a very nasty case of bronchitis, and while I'm still recovering, excuse me, I was not well enough to do a movie review in time for the Lego movie, but suffice to say, you should go see it. It is an excellent movie. I do not know why people say there cannot be a good kids movie. And I will do that critique, I do promise, but it will have to come out a little bit later after I finish this one. But sit tight for that. As for Robocop, now I know that the critics are trashing this movie left and right. They're saying that it's not as good as the previous Robocop, that the romance in it makes it bad, etc., etc., etc. I'm afraid I have to respectfully disagree. As someone who has not seen the previous Robocop, my pop culture feet are firmly planted in the 90s and early 2000s. However, and I do say this as a fellow critic, I think that what the critics are doing is unfair to the movie because as a movie, especially a remake, has to be able to stand on its own without winking to the camera and saying, oh look, we did the exact same thing here as we did in the previous movie, or we did the exact same thing here as we did in the previous movie. No. Movies need to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, regardless of whether or not they're first, second, third, or in a franchise, or if they're a remake of another one. And I do believe Robocop not only stands on its own 2 feet, but is a very good movie in its entirety. In my research to do the critique of Robocop, the essential point of the Robocop, the first one at least, was to be a satire both on news medias and corporations and how corruption is structured into cities and all that other stuff. And quite frankly, this Robocop is a modern day update that as a satire deals with that perfectly well. They go after the modern news media, and its spin indoctrination. They go after corporations and how they want to rule everything, and they go after corruption in politics, and they even touch a little bit on family matters versus progress. And I honestly do not see any particular problem with this movie. I think the problem is that most people are too nostalgic for the Robocop, the original Robocop, because it's either something they grew up with, or it's something they saw and they thought it was awesome, and they're comparing it to this one. And this happens with every movie that gets remade. For example, when I was very young, I saw a movie called Where the Red Fern Grows, and recently, a couple of years ago, saw a remake. Didn't like it, and it was only until I went back and looked at the original one that I saw, I said, you know what, the remake, they actually did a better job with this remake of telling the story than they did with the original one. They're both fairly true to the story, but the new one is just as good as the old one. I feel the exact same way here with this Robocop. Let's take the news media, for example. We have Samuel L. Jackson, who's playing a flawless imitation of dear departed Glenn Beck, who left Fox News for God knows why, but he was so entertaining. And basically they said, okay, how can we take all the different gimmicks that the media has and smush them together? So they basically took the liberal conservative snapping at each other that MSNBC and Fox News do with their sensationalism, and then they took basically CNN's holograms, which is basically the only reason why anyone watches CNN anymore. They mushed that together and they said, okay, run with it. And Samuel L. Jackson literally just inhabits that character, and he plays it so well. Although I still can't get over him from Django for some reason. I don't know. And then you have the corporation omnipresent, or something. like or Omnicraft, they literally were not very subtle with the name. They're like, it's Omni, it's Omni everywhere. It wants to be everywhere. This is the corporation that wants to be everywhere. Not particularly subtle, but you know what? Good job on making this particularly generic corporation the bad guy. And showing us, yeah, they're driven by profits. They don't actually want to help people, despite what they claim. They are willing to grease whatever hands they want to, and they just go with it. It also harkens back to a couple of old ideas. Yes, it doesn't matter how good technology is. The human brain is far more sophisticated, far more versatile, far more adaptable, and quite frankly will overcome whatever you try to do to it. I mean, there's some very great scenes where I believe this is the same in the previous movie, that Robocop overrides his protocol. And it's like, wait, we didn't program his brain to do that. Well, yeah, because his brain is a living organism. It can compensate for things. For example, in order to calm him down in one particular scene, they lower his dopamine levels to a point that really should have killed him. Because you need dopamine in order for the brain to make its neural reactions function. But they lower it to a point that should have killed him, and later on in the movie, I guess the brain starts to compensate, and it's like, okay, and they see the dopamine rising back up, and it's like, what's going on? I'm like, the brain produces dopamine, you idiot. That's something. I'm a biology teacher. I know that. You're an intricate biology and neuroscientist that's also great at working with robotics and all that stuff. How do you not know this? That's medicine 101. Excuse me. Pardon me. Now, for those of you who are going to see it as an action movie, there are very few action scenes. There's one in the beginning where they're in Tehran. There's another where they're training him. There's a couple more. The action scenes are small, but when they do pop up, they hit you hard, they hit you fast, and they are big. There are explosions. There are probably more bullets fired in this movie than the entire Civil War. So take that as you will. This is pretty good. They also updated a lot of the tech. So if you remember, for all the hardcore fans, if any of you are still here for me saying that it was a good movie, the Ed 209 is basically the laughingstock of the internet because it can fire thousands and thousands of bullets, but it cannot open a simple door. In this particular movie, they said, okay, we're not going to make the Ed 209 the basic robot. That's going to be the big, hefty, strongman robot. We're going to have smaller versions. They basically look like people. They're basically, what would I call them? They're basically the droids from Iron Man 2, except not as beefed up and much better looking. So those are the main soldiers, I guess is what you would say. And that's basically an update. People are still driving, regular cars. Detroit looks a lot better, all things considered. For a person who is like right here in the modern day looking at Detroit, I guess, 6 years in the future, Detroit bounced back pretty well. I don't know what they did, but they bounced back pretty well. Bottom line, go see this movie. It's worth the money you pay. It's worth the money you pay for it. Don't listen to what everybody else says. I respectfully disagree with Brad Jones, the cinema snob, and my good friend Mr. Tom Ernst. This is a movie worth watching. Even the romance bits, it shows you. I almost feel like a lot of people are complaining about the romance between Alex and his wife. They're basically like, well, oh, why is she here? You could have literally written her out of the movie. Well, yes, you could have written her out of the movie. But, just let me spitball here. But it actually shows you what the real emotional tax on a person who is married to someone who gets so horribly injured and then basically they get turned into what is essentially a robot. Not a robot, a cyborg. They essentially get turned into 90% cyborg. and then they have to deal with that emotional experience. And you could see, yes, she still loves her husband, the son, although he's shocked in the beginning. He gets used to the idea of having a robot dad. I mean, a robot dad who is there is better than having no dad at all, right? Right? And basically, yeah, you see that you see you see what the emotional toll is on someone who is directly related to that, and I think it works. I really do. There are a lot of people are like, well, why is she there? We could have inserted an action scene. Well, why? Why? Is this movie not action? Well, it probably isn't action filled enough for you, or is it not emotional enough? It's fine. It's fine. All the little parts work. A lot of people said they should have polished the script a little bit more. I honestly don't see any place that they could polish. I mean, even James Franco, James Franco's in this movie, and you know how he is whenever he's in a movie. He's a good actor, but even he's fine. Even he's fine. I didn't mind his performance as the sleazy marketing guy. I think he played it pretty well. So basically, go see this. It's it's a great movie. In terms of February releases, see this, see Lego Movie, skip Vampire Academy and Monuments Men. You know they're gonna suck. Why would you spend your money on doing that? I only did it because I thought it was something good, but oh well. Please, just go see these movies, have a great time, laugh it up. It's got lots of funny moments, sad moments, action moments, and nicely put together. And I will see you in the next critique. Bye, guys.